Kind of a mystery for them and a bit of a mystery for me. I had some pieces, these are a couple of my older pieces here, and I've been going through a bit of a process over the last few years of grief and loss, because I had some people very close to me pass, and it also was a few years after I had had a serious illness. And so I'd moved into doing work in water clay, which was a more traditional material for me, because physically it seemed to make more sense. The way I'd been doing work previously, and that I continue to do work in, is with oil clay. And the advantage of that oil is that it is a material that has a little bit more standalone properties. It doesn't dry out in the way water clay dries out, but you do have to do molds with it. So it's much more labor intensive until you get to the final product. So that was kind of, my brain was a little mush because of what I was going through. So the water clay made sense for me to get the work out. It was, and I kind of worked my way back through this process. And so some of my Sentinel pieces here are up front, and then some of my newest work is in back, which is completely in water clay. So it's made and fired, and then I put the patina on it. Some of the pieces, I also did an extra step of the patina is not a hand patina. It is hand patina, but it is glazed. So it is slightly more traditional with the ceramic pieces. But that whole doing work with water clay brought up the physicality of doing sculpture and large-scale sculpture and painting. Painting can be a very physical thing. It kind of it brings up slightly different ways of movement in the body, and I noticed it was really helpful for me, and it also started kind of unlocking some of the experiences I had as a child, which touched on loss. So I'll explain a little bit of that. I'm doing a lot of loss, grim, but it's not, I mean, being able to do the work, it took me a long time to realize that my best go-to is to do artwork and is to fix on that. I'm kind of bereft and at loss if I just sit with feelings that are uncomfortable. But if I can start working with something, whether it's with my garden, I do a lot of work with nature, with the clay, with whatever it is, it just kind of clicks in. So the two pieces I thought I'd talk specifically about are the Sticks and Stones, which is a collaboration with beaver, Castor canadensis, that I've had for a little over 25, 30 years on my property, learning how to communicate. A lot of my work is learning how to communicate. I've always had difficulties with communication. When I was younger, I had a little bit of a stutter. So the communicating with, living with in this kind of inner space, because I live on the other side of Eugene, and it's on some old farmland, and it's kind of in between, as so many of us in the Pacific Northwest live in between this more wild area. I live in the transition area between kind of a highway system and the more human element, and where you get out into the land, and it's there. And if you're not trying to impose yourself on it as a human, the animals are there, and they're just doing their little animal things all the time. And so learning that form and working with them has been really joyful in the process of rewilding. And that was part of this, starting to, instead of when it's almost too polite company to talk about the horrible ways I was thinking about the beaver when I first moved there. When they would go after the saplings I was planting, because I planted thousands of trees on my property, and the beaver would go after them at first. And so I had all kinds of devious thoughts in my brain about, I've got to get rid of these. I have to have this idea. I'd studied landscape architect in school for a little while, and I was thinking about Versailles and, Vita Sackville West Garden, and like these rigid, but a little bit of wild out here, but mainly the formal. I wanted formal everywhere. I grew up in the woods, and everything was kind of messy, and I loved it. But when I went to have a garden, I kept thinking it has to look a certain way. And so learning to work with these animals that are native here, and when they're architects of this water system. And we know this now. But we didn't necessarily know this, or I wasn't necessarily paying attention to how important they are. So this was my attempt, and this was also the discovery of these beaver are moving through this area. They're now rewilding. They're building dams. They've changed my pasture into a whole wetland, which is wonderful. There are all kinds of birds coming through. This time of year, there are babies everywhere. It's so full of life. And they seem to leave these little things. Like some of these things are, is that something they did because they just wanted to do it? Or does it fit in you can kind of mythologize this, anthropocentize the whole thing. But it's like when you're really in your craft, you're just doing it because you love it. And that's the feeling I started getting out of the way the beaver were working. And I added the human element, the concept of making, these clay balls are not just a clay ball that I put a bunch of clay together. These are hollow. I had to think about it. I made a form. I had to make them separate. They're separate. Then you put them together. Then you seam them up. You have to poke a hole specially so all the water vapor escapes, so you don't have it explode in the kiln. It's kind of a conceptual thing. And for me, that made a lot of sense, that we're dealing with the beaver with their little concepts and the human element. So that was one of my communication series. I have a few more. Thank you for letting me go on about that. And then I kind of worked my way back. This is another piece. This is weight. You can come in and see it after. And this was around some of my illness. And it was, again, it was kind of a communication with my body as I was going through that process. I had this fascinating experience of seeing a little tiny, kind of like a little tumorous thing, and it had these little tentacles, and it seemed like I kind of had a little, a tentacle-y name for it or something. And so again, this is just another example of how I work through a lot of these things, which have been kind of difficult. And it's just me, this is my process. So that's how then we get to these more protective figures back here, which are again in water clay. And they are also about that protective quality of coming out, protecting yourself, but also this kind of, definitely armored up. And then finally to the blackberry. And with another of the little communication with beaver over here, this kind of altar thing. The blackberry for me was kind of the last little aha. I had blackberries. We were tackling blackberries. One of my friends is here, and she was helping, work with blackberries. And we were like, the blackberries are taking over the pasture, and this whole kind of antagonism towards blackberries, And so many of us have a mixed love-hate relationship with blackberries. It's like they are invasive. They are colonizers, much like beavers make colonies. Beavers are the natives. We are the colonizer. You know, it's kind of like flip the narrative, flip the switch on this, you know, on the story on this. So here we are, my friend who is busily taking out, much like a beaver, consistently going out there and clipping the blackberries every day, was talking about, well, I'm worried that when we take the blackberry bush down, the things that have been living under it won't have a place. There's been, I think there was a little rabbit that had been living under it, or a raccoon or something. It was a home, it's habitat. It isn't just something that you go in and willy-nilly, and they've been here for so long. Our ecosystem has kind of accepted them and now utilizes them. So that was thinking, and that was when I had this little aha of this thing that had happened when I was quite young, because I've always been fascinated with the blackberry. And there's amazing painting that I had seen for many years in my mind's eye, and I remembered what had happened. When I was around 3 years old, I had this, walking up the hill in the horse pasture. I had been visiting the horses, and a woman who lived on the property, she was a painter, her name's Judith Sparks, I think she's still in the area, wonderful painter, was doing something, you know, painting. And as I got close to her, you know, I saw that she was kind of looking off into space, and I said, "What are you doing?" You know, I'm 3 years old. And she said, "Well, I'm painting that." And I said, "The blackberry?" And she said, "Yes, the blackberry." And why? And, you know, "Well, isn't it beautiful? You know, don't you think?" And it's, you know, it was that little hook, don't you think? Don't you think? Well, here I am thinking, I'm looking at the blackberry, looks like a blackberry. It's, you know, it's this thorny thing, it's scary, it's this and that. Then I look over at her painting, and it's a whole different world, this painting. It's the colors, she got the greens and the chartreuse of this grass. The grass was new, it was kind of spring. You know, she got in the blue, which is a little bit almost purpley kind of thing behind it, you know, of the sky. There was the red clay that comes through in some areas. You know, I could feel that as a child. I was like, it's so clear in my head, this painting that she was making. And this was a whole different world she was introducing me to. This was a way of seeing that had this feeling to it. And that, I didn't think at the time, I want to be, you know, I want to be an artist, I want to be a painter, or any of that. But I did have that feeling of, I want to be in that world. I want to be able to do something in that, with that, make that. And so that was a few months ago when I was starting to work on this. That came up like, oh my goodness, that's where that stuff comes from, you know. And I feel really, because it's taken me a long time to get to the point where I can start to connect the dots, where I'm not just reacting when I have a pain or I'm having a thing, where I'm able to know this is one of the little breadcrumbs that I'm being given on the way. These are the breadcrumbs, these are the symbols and the mythology that we make that are on the way to that seeing, and that starting to kind of grasp around what that unknown is, that quality. And so this is for me, this is another of my, all these pieces are kind of transition pieces, because we're always in that state of transition, and I've been able to fall back on this in a way I'm really grateful for, because this is what it's all about. And I guess that's kind of what I got. So if anyone has any questions, I think that's long enough. I don't know if anyone has any questions for me, materials, topics, then yes, thank you. This one, here.
People love that.
I know, it's wonderful. I love that piece too, thank you. This is another of the pieces I made in water clay, and I was actually I had put together an art class, a figure modeling class at the local Grange, and I was doing it for quite a few years, and then it basically kind of stopped at the pandemic. But we had these models that we were using, how really wonderful models were coming in, and this was one of the women took this pose, which was kind of like enveloped, like she was holding something, and it's a very difficult pose to take, actually. And the way I started feeling was that she was actually the difference between the nakedness of the back and this kind of pillow that she was holding, and that's just kind of feeling around it. Sometimes when I'm doing a figure, something kind of more animal or more, something will come up for me. And this was what came up for me, is that she has built this little protective layer around her, and that made me think about the different ways that we're protecting ourselves and layers. And this other piece here was the next piece in it, the same kind of thing of where, you know, these different, it's fascinating, animals that use different, and insects, all of these different layers of like armoring up. And then to be able to move while you're doing it. And that's the trick, right? Once you put all your armors on, I mean, how are you gonna move? Yeah.
Are those viruses
on
the table?
Are they viruses?
Yeah.
Oh, I love that question too. That does go back. I mean, I think we all got fascinated with some of the depictions of the virus during the pandemic. It's this, you know, I don't know how accurate they were, but they were made cute little, you know, cartoon things. Look, it's nothing to be afraid of, kind of thing. They also are a little reminiscent for me, as I mentioned, seeing that X-ray and seeing that what that little creature was making, which was searching out through cells. So it's like this strange little part of me was horrified and fascinated at the same time. Like, what interesting little form is my body making? You know, it's its own little personality in a way, and it was my way of dealing with it. But yeah, so in a way, it was kind of a virus thing. Yeah. And they're water clay as well. So yes.
I'd like to hear more about these two pieces in the front.
Yeah.
They're used the word like, I don't know, signature or what? Sentinel.
Yeah, sentinel. A few people have said sentinel pieces, and you know, I've had them for a while. I have them in a space at home. I've lived with them for quite a while, and they do make any space they've been in, they do have a sentinel quality. And I think that is, again, that protective element where we're in this, you know, these are kind of a doorway element for me as well. I'm working with a figure now that has a transition doorway kind of element to it. And these have that in between, that liminal space. So you're contained, you're in your own space, but at the same time, it's a very vulnerable. It's not like they're being contained. They're like, can they get out? Can they break free? What are they doing? The gestures are were around, to be perfectly honest, they were around some mental stuff that was going on. I have a whole strain of, most artists probably do, kind of, a lot of us do, like depression with the world. Manic, you know, I mean, where do you contain the energy? What do you do with it? So that was definitely a feeling of like, if too much awake, too much asleep. So I think the way that I was able to make it okay, that feeling, was to armor up a bit, was to be protected. So that's kind of where they came out of. And they are hydrocal.
Are they all in ones? Are there more of these?
Right now, I just have the two of them. Okay. Yeah. But I do have a third piece, which is quite a bit. It's a bit different that I may have for July, but it also has this kind of boxed element. I'm pretty excited about, and it is okay to move them. Yeah. Thanks. Well, now that I'm getting asked, I'm taking notes, like, okay, this one was a hit, these two were hit. These fired? Yeah. No, these are actually, I made them in an with oil clay, the plastilina, and then I did molds, and then I took the clay out, and then I poured hydrocal into it, and then carefully chipped the mold off, and then they were patinaed. And they are able to move because they do have a metal pin that goes through. So that was put into place in the mold, carefully put in, and then poured around it. So that when I chipped it away, I was able to expose the ends, and then the cabinetry is made and closed up over the pins. Thank you. Yeah. So. And I think we're open here till 6. Thank you so much for this opportunity to show here.
We're open until 6 today. There's art hop maps, really nice art hop maps that Sarah made for the first time ever. There's art hop. Please take one if you want to go out hopping. Erica's show will be open on Saturdays, except for the last Saturday of the month, and you may swap out some stuff for July, because you'll be here through July. If you want to come back and experience the art more, or bring some friends back, we're here.
Thank you, Renee.
We have a mailing list. You can sign up for our mailing list. There's an email list there on the table in the office, and we send a newsletter once a month to tell you who the guest artist is and what the happenings are. More than once a month. We promise not to spam you.
And we recorded this talk, so it will be on the Oblivion Factory YouTube channel if you'd like to rewatch it or share it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.